Casting a vision is something that a visionary person does. But it's not always that easy because you're predicting the future. And in today's world, it will look like for everyone else that you've got no evidence of what you're speaking about. And in many ways, we don't, but we are predicting, and often we have this built-in system for how we're predicting it. So I'm going to try in the next few minutes to explain how that works. But before that, let me tell you a few stories. If I go back in time to 1993, I got my first cell phone. My friend asked me, what are you going to do with that thing? And I said, I'm going to make phone calls with it. And then I predicted on the spot that in the future, and this happened when I was 17, in the future, 10 years from now, everyone will be having a cell phone. Why was that? Because if the technology was there to walk around, not being connected to a cable, or to stand by a phone booth, waiting for people to call you back, if that technology existed, everyone would adapt it as soon as it would go down in price. A few years later, I predicted that network marketing, so direct selling, which we're in, will become a mega trend in the future. Well, the time frame I give isn't been completely correct. But I believe right now with the drive of AI, which is the ultimate automation of society, we're a few years from now, it hasn't happened yet, even though lots is happening very fast, it will replace so many tens of millions of jobs that people will really search for something else to do. And I think that that's going to lift the profession of direct selling. And I've been talking about this for over 2 decades already. Then I remember in 2004 when I saw a coffee pod machine for the first time. I put in a pod and it made me coffee, and I said, wow, it tastes as good as it does at the coffee shop. And I understood that single serve would be the predominant growth of the coffee market for the future. And that was why in 2005, Cincino was launched as a coffee company. And we still sell some of that coffee in the original markets, the Nordic and the Baltic. But something even better happened in 2012. I ran in to the balance test and the balance oil, and it changed my life forever. And I said, this is a mission we can take, and we can become the pioneer company of test-based nutrition. And that's going to change and impact the world a lot more, in my opinion, than coffee pods, even though I love coffee, than direct selling, even though I love the profession that we're in, and cell phones, even though I'm completely addicted, so is my wife and my kids, to their smart devices. So I'm not taking anything from anything else. I'm just saying that the impact this will have on society is far beyond what we can understand. Now, being a visionary isn't always that easy, because we often get met by opposition. It wasn't so that Hilda said when I first brought out the balance test and the balance oil, to see that she said, that's a genius idea. In fact, she said, I don't think we should do that because we predicted the future of coffee and that still hasn't happened fully. Then I said, but we can lead this one. We can be the pioneers. We can dominate this. We can dominate it from a test side by developing the technology of the test, and we can dominate it from a product side. And that domination is going to be so magnificent moving into the next few years. So to predict the future, we'll look at what will not change and what will change. And what will not change is the needs. The need for communication, the need for social belonging, the need for transportation, or the need for health. That will not change. Humans have had those needs for thousands of years already. But the technology that we do it with will change. If you look at communication, we went from a letter to the telegraph, to the telephone, to the mobile, to the cell, to the smartphone. And now you can even make phone calls with those fancy glasses, and you can connect live on video all over the world. So that's continuing to change. Social belonging is there still, and I'm not going to go into all the levels of everything here because that would take me a very, very long time. But you know, you went from having social only being in person to social being also including Facebook, including TikTok, including a global community. There you could connect in social media, and your friends wasn't only the people that you would meet in person. Now, the need for transportation is an obvious one. We used horses, then I think it was made probably boats, and then came the trains, and then came the car, and then came the airplane. But the biggest revolution is yet to come, because in the future, the cars will be driving themselves, and you will be happily joining to fly across the world in airplanes without pilots. Well, some people get scared when I get to be too visionary, because visionary people, we are the crazy ones, or at least people look at us as the crazy ones. We look at us as actually pretty sane, and we look at the rest and say, don't you understand that that will change? But we are crazy enough to understand or to think that the world will change. And then we are crazy enough to say that we are going to be the people that facilitates that change. And we actually take a lot of passion and a lot of engagement into it. We get excited about it because we know that when the world is back in balance, the world is a better place to live. So, spotting the global mega trend going from guest-based nutrition to test-based nutrition, which will take the profession of nutrition or the industry of nutrition from a 200 plus billion right now to over $1 trillion in probably the next 30 years, something like that. Might be 25, might be 35. Don't hold me too exact to the dates. But to spot that, here is how we look at it. There is a global need for health. It's the same everywhere. The need for health is at all ages. Then we got to see, is there an existing spending pattern? Because if there isn't an existing spending pattern, we can't for sure say that a new technology will change everything. So if we look now at the spending pattern around health, it's actually the biggest budget of the government, and it's the biggest budget of the family. We are spending more money on health than anything else. And I actually include into the budget in the family all the foods, because the foods are the precursors of nutrition. So nutrition is just a more advanced type of food. It's the next generation. And by the way, we're also working on the next generation of nutrition. That makes me very excited. But that's for a later moment. That's for another video to explain how the next generation of nutrition is going to be laid out. So there is an enormous spending in the area of health already. Then we look at what's the new technology in that specific area. So if you look now at nutrition, the balance test was a specific technology into the area of omega-6 to omega-3, or into the area of omega-3 if you want to simplify it, where we measure all your fatty acids that is built up in your cell membrane. And your cell membrane is actually the most important nucleus in the body, because everything in your body happens either passing in through the cell membrane or coming out of the cell membrane. And then we use a lot of those nutrients in the mitochondria inside. And the mitochondria also have a membrane built by the same fats. So then when we find there is a new technology, meaning that there is a new technology, a test that will tell you if you get enough omega-6s and if you get enough of omega-3s. And now from science, we know that we get way too much omega-6 and we're getting too little omega-3. But now it becomes personal. And then, do we have a product that will kind of like close the gap so much better than existing products in the market? Will we be able to do this better than what the doctor's recommendation is? Will we be better than doing this than what they do it at the fitness club? Will we be better at doing this than other omega-3 companies? Will we be better at doing this to the degree where the customer feels that when they've gotten into our products and later on into balance, which we call it, will they feel that it's a 10x difference? And if the answer to that is yes, then we move to number 5, is that can we completely replace the old? And the truth is yes. So what do we replace? Well, we replace a part of the food budget, because in the food basket, when you go shopping, we have filled up everything with omega-6s. And we didn't know that for a long time, because before the test, we didn't know that everyone had such a large problem. 97% fails this test, you know. When we look at that, well, because the whole feed industry got filled up with omega-6s, and everything that we eat eats omega-6 before we eat it. So our levels got elevated. And then we also had dietary changes. That means that we are not getting as much omega-3s as we used to. And with correcting this, we set our health straight again. And the results from it is mesmerizing. The amount of testimonials that I've heard, the amount of thank you notes that I've gotten on physical paper, even in the mail as letters, but as text messages, as social media, or when I meet them at events, is just mesmerizing. The amount of feedback that I've heard my leaders getting from across the world. We're selling to over 100 markets, and we're officially operating in more than 50 countries. The feedback that we get is just mesmerizing. So we've got all of the things in place to become a global megatrend. Cincino can become a global megatrend company. That is a company like Apple, like Facebook, like Netflix, like Tesla, and I could mention many, many more. And there is, of course, the mega big ones and the smaller ones. But I think that we can become a company that goes to 100 million customers by 2050. A global megatrend grows in 5 phases. First is the innovation. It's the people that are crazy enough to try to change the future. The ones that get in early, that is kind of like they want to try it out. And the way they get in is the innovators, is their interest, is because they work in the area, but it's also true or model of direct selling. They get in because they got introduced before somebody else. And when somebody else said no, they happen to say yes. And that first phase takes us from 0% of the population using the new product to 2.5% of the population. The furthest we have gotten in this first phase is that we've gotten to over 1.5% in Norway, and Scandinavia has solidly passed 1%, and the Baltics have solidly passed 1%, and there is many more countries across Europe that is getting close to 1%. We cannot predict exactly when we have finished the innovation, but when I listen to what's happening right now, and that's the things that drives it, you know, how it goes faster. And that is that the growth of the trend is determined by the political needs and how many copies you. And I can tell you that every single month now, I'm hearing about somebody wanting to go into test-based nutrition. And it's probably a lot more than ones that I hear about. That's just ones that crosses my table. There will literally be tens of thousands of companies joining into the trend of test-based nutrition just in the next few years, which will lift us as the pioneer, as the leader of the market, to new heights. But what I didn't expect to come this fast was that politicians, that people that have influence far beyond my reach today, I hope I will have that global influence one day in the future, is constantly in the media talking about the overusage of plant oils. Omega-6s, is that what they're actually saying? And they say seed oils, that's omega-6s again, and how we are lacking omega-3s in society, and how that is driving all of the health problems that we've seen growing so fast for the last 60 years. That is the big problem, they say. The politicians say. There is a few out there right now. You can follow them, and I recommend you to follow them. I don't want to put their names in there because this is not about politics. This is so much bigger than politics. But that drives the trend. And the reason why that happened was because there all of a sudden became a health minister that comes from sort of our background. He was already into nutrition, and he wants to move this forward. So this is a trend on the product. Now, the second thing that they say, the only way to know is to test. And that is the trend of the testing. And testing is going, again, as I said, to explode the profession of nutrition into an enormous amount of sales. When we move from innovation, we move into trend setting. That is the cool people and the professionals that work inside of the area, and they get convinced that this is a better way of doing it. And this is happening already at a massive scale. So even though we're not at 2.5% inside of a full country, if you look at the nutrition community of Norway, we've passed 2.5%. If you look at the sports community, we've passed 2.5% in many, many countries. And if you look at health professionals working with alternative methods of health, we've by far reached 2.5%. We're probably more getting into early majority. So from 2.5 to 13.5% impact is then called trend setting. And then the next 34% of growth is 16 to 34%, which is called early majority, and it's mainstream. It's when the fast movers, the fast followers are coming and say, well, I need to take care of my health. I need to also get into balance. After that, early majority became into late majority, another 34%, from 50 to 84%. Those are the ones that are a little bit conservative. They don't want to have the things first, and eventually comes the laggards. The people that hate me, the last 16%, the people that think that I've completely lost my mind when I say that you need to take a test and then you need to take an oil and that will replace some of your food budget. They say, how can somebody say something like that? And they eventually don't want change, but when there is no more option in step number 5, they will comply just like the rest of us. So what are the benefits of being a part of Cincino in the middle of this? Well, you become a part of something bigger than Cincino. You become a part of a movement that is going to change the world. How are we changing the world? Well, your family and friends reaps the first benefit of being in that innovator group, later on being in that trend-setting group, and they get healthy before the others. We build a blue zone. And a blue zone is a definition of where people are more healthy than the rest of the people around them, so that they can live longer and enjoy the benefits of good health. Then we also have the income opportunity as a partner. When you come in with a company that is growing year over year over year, and the demand for the product is increasing year over year over year over year, it's incredible how fast you can expand an organization. And I honestly think that we will have tens of thousands of people becoming diamonds in the next decades. And I think that we will have thousands of people becoming all the ranks in between, crowns and royal crowns and black crowns and eventually presidents. And they change their life financially through the income stream that they're creating. They're not only changing their health, they're changing the lives of their families because of that income. And then number 4, you become an investor. We're a publicly traded company at the Nasdaq First North in Sweden. And you can buy some shares in a company and enjoy when a company becomes one of those mega brands out there. Because if you spot a mega trend and you create a product inside of the mega trend, that is a new technology that changes the perception. When you take the test, you can never go back. You know that you're out of balance and you want to be in balance. And then you have a product that works 10x better than the rest, so that when people are in balance, there is no option to go back to another product. Then you create history and you get tens of millions, then 100 million, and probably in the future hundreds of millions of customers. And in the stock market, that gets rewarded and you become the history maker of this change in the world. I believe that history is being made as we're speaking, and Cincino is this company that is making that history as the pioneers of test-based nutrition.